Okay.
Okay, thank you everyone for joining us tonight for this book talk. I know it's already getting late and it has been a gloomy day in Los Angeles, which is the perfect type of day to sit down and read a book, honestly, especially a book like The Perishing. We are delighted to have Natashia here with us, who is a NAACP Image Award nominee, practicing criminal attorney, and a college professor. And if all of that wasn't enough, also had an award-winning debut novel. So we are especially excited here to have you for your second book, The Perishing. With Natashia today, we also have Minda Harts, who has her own few books that have come out. We have a memoir, but most recently we also have Right Within, which I will be sharing links to. So without further ado, we will start the book talk, and we will also have a Q&A near the end. So if you have questions along the way, please put them in the chat.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Cyan. I'm excited to be here with you today, Natasha, to talk about, I hope everybody got it. We're putting that link in the chat, so make sure you get it if you don't have it already. So are we ready to hop in?
I think we're ready. Are they ready? It's like, I think we're ready.
Okay, we're going to get into it. I just am really honored to be in conversation with my friend. What a lot of people may not know is I stalked Natasha about 4 years ago at the Well-Read Black Girl Festival in Brooklyn, New York. I had read Grace, and I was not leaving Brooklyn without having some FaceTime with her, and she was gracious enough to give me some time, and time turned into friendship, and I'm just so honored to know you. You've been so supportive of my author journey, and I just want to say thank you publicly for who you are and how you show up for us. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Minda, thank you so much. Thank you so much. I'm reading Cyan's message if folks had a hard time here. Okay, I see that. But so I'm just going to pick it up where you left off, Minda, because you didn't tell the whole story. When I first met Minda, I was walking out of a well-read Black girl panel, and I remember seeing her there, and it was like I saw, you know how you see people and you just connect and you just know that this person is going to be meaningful in your life. But I didn't just see that. I just saw this future of wherever she was going, it was going to be big. And I didn't tell her that until much later. But I stalked her. I had a podcast. I was like, you have to come because I know you're going to be huge, all this. And it's just an honor to be here and to watch you on MSNBC, on, representing Google or consulting with Google and Apple and all of that. I'm just so proud because I was fortunate, privileged really to be able to see that. And now I get to say I'm not crazy. I was right.
You are talented in so many ways. So, again, if you have not gotten Natasha's latest book, please do, but also get the collection, get Grace as well, because that is an awesome book. But I just want to start, Natasha, by asking you, I know with your first book, you had like a premonition with Grace on kind of where to go from there. How did the idea for The Perishing come about? I'm sure everybody wants to hear it because it's such a dynamic and complex book that I get those Octavia Butler vibes too. So I really love it.
Oh, thank you. It came, I can't say it wasn't exactly like Grace. So Grace was like a premonition or a daydream. I don't even have words for it because I don't think really a background to say, oh, these are dreams and this is what they mean. It just happened. So with Grace, the opening chapter is just what happened, what I saw. And it became the book. And the book was, hard work in the writing of the thing. And the perishing came similarly, but I was asleep. So with Grace, I was awake. With the perishing, I had a nightmare. Well, it was a dream that scared me because, and in this dream, I was like a character in the dream. Um, and I was a white passing Black woman, and I was in love with this Chinese man, and I knew things about him, and I felt this love in the dream, and it was strange. And then this scary thing happened. And when it ended, I woke up and I was crying. And I said, I have to Google what I saw. It felt so real. It felt like a memory. I wonder if people like this could have existed. And I knew it was in LA because of the architecture. And the dates, I knew it was late 1800s. So basically, I wrote down what I saw, and then I found the Chinese massacre of 1871, which was in my dream, which I hadn't known about to my knowledge before then. And it became chapter 35 of The Perishing. And I knew I didn't want to go back because I'd already covered that period in Grace, up to 1865. But I knew I wanted to find a way to bring that story and link it to the story that I felt called to tell, which was about the 1930s Los Angeles, basically showing how Black people went from this thriving community in Los Angeles, which was described by W.E.B. Du Bois as like the Beverly Hills, basically, for Black people. We owned our homes. It was, and then it became what we, in the 90s, when I grew up in it, as South Central LA, Compton, all that. Like, what happened to us? So that's what I wanted to cover in the 1930s, gave me an opportunity to tell that story, and then a way to link in that dream.
Well, I'm glad that you did not get too scared of your dreams, that you didn't write them down and produce such a beautiful, beautiful book. And I want to tap into the backdrop. So the novel is set in against Los Angeles, as you mentioned. How does the setting influence the narrative? You talked a little bit about it, but we'd love to hear more. And how do you think the story would have been different had it been a different backdrop, say maybe Harlem or New Orleans or something? But curious, we're both from California, so I love that Los Angeles does get that shine and that historical context. But want to hear so much more.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. There's to me there's no place like LA. People who aren't from here or who aren't part of the community can't understand the shine, as you say, of Los Angeles and the history. I grew up in the West Adams district. Nobody hears about West Adams. West Adams is where Hattie McDaniel was, the first Black insurance company. There's so much Black history there. So the Great Migration brought us from the South, which is what my family did, to to the West LA area, which most of the property and homes were owned by Black people. And when I talk about LA, it's one of those cities, like so many of us, and even like a Black woman to me, who had little. It had no natural port. It had no water supply. It wasn't, centrally located in a strategic position. It didn't have any of the things that the big cities like Boston or Philadelphia or New York had, but it still grew and became this sort of dream and this icon, which to me represents our city. It grew despite everything and became a leader in the world. And I love that. And to me, she's just this beautiful Black woman who thrives anyway.
Beautifully said. I love that so much. And one of your characters in the book is Sarah. And in chapter 2, I want to read it. I want to get it right. Sarah says, "So how I appeared, skin color and all, was merely a fact to me, not the basis for what should be expected of my character. Do you think Sarah being ending of racism benefited her or hindered her?"
Okay, do I think that Sarah being ignorant of racism benefited or hindered her? I wanted I think that we have so many systems that need to be dismantled. And there's some things that we think are just natural, like racism. So I wanted her to be aware of racism differently. Um, for instance, and the only way I could do it is the way that I did it in this book. I didn't know how to explain this feeling, but I grew up in LA, and then when I was, a young person, moved to an all-white neighborhood in the suburbs when that party drug crack cocaine came and ravaged our neighborhood. So we moved to LA. I mean, out of LA, the city, the heart of the city, to be safer. And it was the first time that I was followed around grocery stores. The first time I heard jokes about the shade of my skin. The first time I always knew I was Black, but it didn't mean that I could dance. It didn't mean that I knew how to play basketball. It didn't mean that I was loud or that I was funny or that I could rap. All these things that these white people expected of me here, I didn't know. And I was like, okay, I got to get good at basketball. I got to be funny. I got to, all these things that I didn't know things were expected of me because I showed up in this skin, because I grew up, in a diverse, it was Black, it was Korean, it was Latino, I spoke Spanish, all those things. It was just what we were. So I wanted Sarah to sort of think about what it means when we see a young Black boy walking down the street with a hood on his head pulled tight, and we all of us look, Black, white, whatever. We're looking either, oh, I hope he's okay, or I wonder what other people are thinking of him. It's part of who we are. So I wanted to slow it all down so we could look at ourselves.
I love that so much, and I resonate with you explaining that, because when I was younger, I grew up in the Inland Empire, but when I was a teenager, my parents moved to the Chicago area, and it was the first time that I was the only Black girl in the classroom, right? And so like all my white classmates would be like, rap, dance, Dr. Dre, and I'm like,
I know. It's like, you're supposed to say honey child. I was like, honey child, girl, roll your neck. Like I'm like, okay, wait, I gotta watch the movies you're watching so I can see how to act.
So my parents don't let me watch those movies, so I don't know what you're talking about. But yeah, exactly.
I know. And I actually had a client tell me that. As a lawyer, I represent, different people, and I was representing a person who had been in foster care, and the mom was not Black. But she says to me, you go in there and you snap your finger and you go like this and you say, judge. And I was like, no, I'm not gonna do like that and say, I'm like, what are you watching? Yeah. So that's, there's just things but I wanted to slow it down and do it in a way that helped people to understand. So with every sentence, I'm trying to do a lot of heavy lifting at one time to explain to I guess, to make it make sense to people who don't understand that experience, and do it in a way that's literary.
Yeah, well, you nailed it. So thank you for doing that. And let's talk a little bit for those who may not have had a chance to read it yet, but who will get it tonight. We have the link in the chat. Is the characters. There's a lot of dynamic characters in the book. Let's talk about a few, just to give people a little Sam's Club sample. So we mentioned Sarah. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about her. There's some other characters. I don't know if you have a favorite one or not, but would love to hear some of that.
Yeah, I love Sarah. I love Letitia, who was written after a friend who is actually white. His name is Dave Thomas. And he said to me, I said, if you could be any character, who would you be? I said, what would your name be? He said, I would be a Black woman and my name would be Letitia. So I was like, okay. I said, I am about to immortalize you, Dave. So that's kind of how that character came. But her heart to me is of wise Black women who seem to know more than we know. And I wanted her to be that person. I love the freedom that Sarah has, because the opening line of this novel can be interpreted different ways. But she says, my name is Sarah Shipley and I've slept with 6 women. But since I married a man, no one asks the kind of persons I choose anymore. So I wanted her to be someone who was beyond sexuality, gender, because she's always Black, not always a woman. And that's one of the mechanics of the book. So I wanted her to have so much freedom, like I said, even away from the mechanisms of sexuality and gender and things that people force us to name or identify with. I wanted her to be beyond that. And her story is she's on trial for the murder of a man.
When I read that opening line, I was like, this is my kind of book. This is my kind of character. I'm like, I want to know all about this. Because we all sit at different intersections, and I'm like, yes, just like taking away these norms. And again, as Black women, as women, sometimes we don't always get to bring our full selves to every certain thing, or people assume certain things about us by just looking at us or hearing us or seeing what we put on. And I already knew when I got to that line that we going for a ride, and I'm here for it. So
Right on, right on. Yeah, I wanted to be as honest as possible with this book. I wanted it to be everything that I would want to say. So if this is my last book, the last thing I get to say, this is how I want to go out. That was how it was. And I didn't know if it would land. I didn't know if my publisher would understand what I was trying to do. But it made it. So
and we know you have many more books to write. So, but I'm glad you were able to get this one out. But you mentioned something about Sarah while she was on trial, and a question that I have. She says, "I only want what's fair and not to be forced to surrender." In what ways does Sarah rebel against surrendering throughout the book?
yeah, so many people. So for me, this book was about Black women and about all the times that we have to surrender throughout our lives to just get along. At least that's sort of the understanding. Feeling so big, going from, I read an article, going from pet to threat, right? That's the journey of Black women. You write about Black women in the workplace, but even as a mother, even as a wife, even as a daughter, like all the ways that we have to surrender every day. And I just want to live. I just want to lead. I want to live in a way that makes sense to me. And that's what Sarah is working towards doing in this book, is to not have to surrender. Not that she wants to hurt anyone. Some people are, a lot of the stories are, if you're gonna, it's fight back or deal with this. But sometimes it's not fighting back. Sometimes it's surrender or live the life I'm supposed to live. Like, I don't want revenge. I just want to be happy. And that's what she's working through.
Sarah definitely is showing us how to be right within, right?
Right. Your book, Right Within. Like, how you gonna win if you ain't right within?
Yes, she's showing us that in various ways. And for those in the audience, again, we're so glad that you're here. If you have questions throughout the conversation, make sure that you just pop them into the Q&A, so that when it's that time, we make sure that we get all the questions asked of Natashia while she's here. I mean, this is a privilege. How often do you get to ask the author the question? And so jumping back in, is you have some other characters, and there's one question I wanted to ask you here. Why do you think Lou is drawn to Esther when she is introduced in the narrative?
That's a great question, because I know the answer to it and it's not on the page. But I guess I'm interested in the ways that that sometimes we're drawn to people within our lives, people that we just met. Like you, I talked about how I saw you. I was like, okay, she's coming to me, but this woman is, whoo, like, do you know? And I don't feel I don't think it's like psychic or anything like that. It was just so clear to me. It just made sense. That's the way I explain it. It just made sense that you are already there, as if it happens at the same time. But sometimes I'm wondering, why do we see that with some people and not with others? Why do we we can get bristled up too when we meet people, like something's not right, and it's not anything they said, but just, and people will call it energy or whatever. But some people, so I wanted them to be drawn to each other, not because Lou is Black and as if Esther were, because she's Chinese, and these two people come together and become friends.
I'm curious because, I appreciate that answer. And while we're talking about Lou, I have some other questions surrounding this character. But Lou has dreams. And now I'm wondering, because you get dreams and things, I'm wondering if there's a little of you and Lou. Is there?
You know what? Writers will say, oh no, it's not me. Or there'll be quotes about, don't see the writer. All of it is me. Like everything that I write, every way that I come to the page, walking and especially choosing to walk an integrated life, one where all my selves are one person, so I don't have to remember who I am. And there was a quote that I read the other day. It said, you know, why don't you just be yourself because someone's looking for you? And they won't find you basically if you're someone else or trying to pretend to be someone else. Um, so in my writing, I try to bring everything that I know to all the characters because they have to be wiser than me. It's not because I believe a certain thing. It's just things that occur to me or that a character I feel like wants to say. She has dreams because I think I don't know what my dreams mean. Like I don't follow dream books. So I'm like, oh, what if I give her a reason? It's the creative part and the freedom to come up with what does it mean to dream and be able to Google things and they're real. I have no definition for that. Like I said before, it's just this is what happened to me and I wrote it down. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, so I wanted her to be weird like me.
Well, I love that. And just kind of digging a little bit more into dreams, what significance does Lou's dreams have? And again, I know you kind of touched on the significance that dreams might have in our lives. Sometimes, even in the book, you talk about sometimes we remember them, sometimes we don't. But I'm just curious what the significance of Lou's dreams, how you see that.
So Lou's dreams are memories. She doesn't know that they're memories. So, like, for instance, when I talked about the sort of chapter 35 of the perishing, what happened and what I saw in that dream, I wanted her to have that throughout her life. I don't usually have dreams like that. That may have been the only time that well, maybe two times. But she always has dreams like this, but I wanted it to be a memory of a life before. So, all these lives that she's led before that lead her to this place. So that's why she has those dreams. And just figuring out what I think about it. Like all of us have dreams. Not all of us remember them. Not all of us remember them in the detail maybe that I remember them. Um, but it's interesting to me. And people will tell you, science will tell you what your dreams might mean. A pastor will tell you what your dreams might mean. Psychic, there's so many people that have so many definitions. And the fact is, I don't know. And use that as an opportunity to tell a story about
Well,
it.
I'm glad that you're using dreams in that way. It's funny. Last night I had a dream, and I couldn't tell you what it was, but I knew when I woke up that somebody I either was fond of or loved, like they were in that dream, and I woke up with a smile on my face. And I don't know anything of what happened. I don't remember, but I remember just saying to God, "Thank you for letting me see that person," because I hadn't seen them in such a long time, and it just you just never know what those things mean. And so, thank you for just reminding us the significance and importance that dreams can have, even if we don't know what they mean or why we're having them.
I love that. I love that. I love that so much, Minda. So I'm gonna tell you what your dream means. No, I'm just kidding.
Listen, that's Zoom after dark, right? Natasha's gonna tell
It'll be all good things. I'll be like, and then you're gonna be queen. Uh, because
I love it.
I would only have positive outcomes for everybody. Everybody gets a car.
Those are the things I want to hear about. One of the things that I wanted to ask you is the 36 in your book. The 36 were chosen to continuously reborn. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Oh, that. Okay, so when I started writing this book, I sat with a friend of mine. Her name is Jamie Shafter, who's a writer. And I was just saying, I just know there's a certain amount of people and they're good and they don't know who they are. And she said it reminded her of a certain Jewish thought about, they're called Lamed Vavniks. And I don't know which denomination of Judaism it is, but it's about these 36 or 25 who basically live in the world and they're considered righteous. And she said for this reason God won't destroy the earth for these people, but they don't know who they are. And I was like, oh, that's what I want to write about because that's what makes sense to this character. And at the time, so I was in seminary school, still am studying psychology. But it was interesting to me because there's a story in the Bible, and people will not like this story because it's a story of Sodom and Gomorrah. And I think people take the wrong things from that. But there's a moment where I think it's Abraham is like, God, will you not destroy this place if you find 50? And then it went all the way down to just 10 people. Will you spare it for 10? And God in this story says, for the sake of 10, I won't destroy it. So in that same way, there's these 36 for whom God will not destroy them. So I just love the mythology of that. Not that I follow that, you know, that religiously or anything, but I thought that was beautiful that there would be people just good enough to just end all this, to stop, to be here to spare us, despite all our chaos and all the evil that's going on. So
I love this. It may be in the works, I don't know, but I do think the perishing, this could be a movie, a mini series. There's a lot here.
Thank you. Well, from your lips to God's ears, because I'm for it.
Yes, there's a lot there, and I love it. One thing that I wanted to dig into is Aaron, one of your characters, tells Lou that he knew her in a past life and warns her that she might be in danger. Why do you think Lou reacts the way that she does? And for me, that part of the story, it actually made me think. I grew up in church, and when I'd go on some Sunday nights, there'd be sometimes a prophet there, and I'd be like, I don't want anybody giving any prophecies. I don't want to know it. I don't, and we get kind of scared. So it kind of like put me, I'm like, I understand how Lou feels.
Yeah, that's it exactly. People assume that you want to know, that everyone wants to know the future, especially like in a church setting. The prophet so and so. I don't want to know. I want to live my life. Let me try to make the right decisions, not because you had gas that day and felt like I don't know, or maybe something about me made you want to come over and talk to me and tell me this thing about myself that wasn't for me. But sometimes we just don't want to know. Sometimes we just don't want. We just want to live, especially when we're going through the trauma that Lou has gone through. She's had these deaths in her family. She's alone, and somebody's trying to come up and give her a word. Like that's not what she wants at this moment. And that's what he was trying to do. So I wanted her to push back on that. So
Yes, thank you for that. There's a lesson in that. We can push back. We don't have to accept what somebody else says to us about us.
right. Because I know I would be all invested. Like I said, I'd be like, girl, you gonna have all this stuff. Because I would never want to deliver some bad news to anybody. But yeah, so
That part. In chapter 12, Lou sees Jefferson in the boxing gym and has vivid visions of him as her lover in one of her past lives. Do you think she was meant to find him? Do you believe in the concept of a soulmate? I definitely want to hear your thoughts on the concept of a soulmate.
I'll be honest, because I don't know. I think mating is something that's so physical, right? Even the definition, soulmate is like a mate. It assumes mating. It assumes like all these things that are really physical things. But so that's why, and I didn't want to make it a religious thing. So when I talk about soulmate, I say, no, not a soulmate or a spirit, not a spirit. It's the inarticulable part of ourselves. And I think there are many people that feeling of familiarity. I don't know that it's just one person, but I knew that I wanted her to have a strong pull to one person. And I've talked to people who are like, no, there's like 11 people for everyone. Or, I don't need all that drama. I don't need all those entanglements as we read in Right Within. And I'm like, I don't need all that. I need to just be focused. So I don't know. I think that we have so many pairs and so many people who we can work together with where it's easy and it's beautiful and we can lift each other up and we want the best for them. And those are the people that I look for in life. Like it's hard enough as it is, it's all going to crap in a handbasket as it is, just be kind. That's what I want. So yeah, and that way they're soulmates.
I like that. I call it like an ease mate. Like I want to connect with people who bring ease to my life, and
Yeah.
vice versa. You know what I mean? And I think that there are ties in the soul that makes it easy. Like you're like when I met you, it was ease, right? And our souls made it.
Yeah. It was like nothing. It was like, in those kind of settings, it could be, sort of offense, it could be an offense. It could be like, whoa, what are you doing? Um, and then also I fear, like coming from a church background too, like so many, there was this movement about soul ties and even other, not even just Christian, but others like uncoupling and all this, and no shade, I don't even know. So maybe that's the right answer. But I just think there's something more than the limitations that we put on each other and how we can relate to one another. Some of them we want to have sex with, some of them we don't. Some of them we want to marry and partner with, some of them we don't. So I don't know.
Good answer. That works for me. I like it. I like it. But again, drilling down a little more into Lou, why do you think Lou considers leaving the Times? And how does Mr. Norris and Charlotte differ in their roles as bosses?
Oh, okay. So, so there's a point I think in every, and you know this better than anybody because you consult on Black women and women of color in the workplace, across the nation, in the largest corporations, um, in the nation, in the world, actually. And there's a point as a Black woman where you're seeing the pain of our community separately, and you want to make a difference there, and you also want to make a living and help fix the systems or rearrange the systems, dismantle the systems. So Charlotta worked for the Black paper, so
Mhm.
she told the stories of the Black community, and Charlotta Bass actually was a figure in history. um, and she was the first vice presidential candidate of the United States of America here in LA. So like I wanted to honor that, but sometimes doing all Black will keep you away from the LA Times, which was the streamline, will keep you away from being part of the system where you can actually change the systems that we're part of. Um, so I wanted her to sort of be between. Do I go all, Black life, or do I sort of straddle this line and deal with the abuse that comes with that?
Mhm.
And change the narrative. So I wanted her to choose to change the narrative and also to have Charlotta encourage her to change the narrative.
Yes, absolutely. And I I called her Charlotte, but it's Charlotta. Thank you for.
Yeah, that's okay.
I love that, and I think that again, there's all those different themes of just that. Regardless of how you might identify or how you show up in the world, they're the characters that you write about. At least I've seen myself in different characters at different points, and so I just love how dynamic the character development is. So I just want to tip my hat to you. One thing that you talk about in the book is Route 66, and it's heavily debated in the novel. And so I'm just curious if you could talk a little bit more about that, and why do you think the construction road was so important to Los Angeles residents?
Yeah, so Route 66, so we know Grapes of Wrath. There's a lot of books about Route 66. There's a Native American project about Route 66, and its construction, how it went over tribal land. So it actually follows, Route 66 goes from Chicago to Los Angeles, kind of like Santa Monica. And it actually follows the path of the Trail of Tears. And we paved over it. Americans paved, the United States paved over it, paved over a lot of things. And we think about the communities that were destroyed. They were often Black communities, communities of color, obviously the Native American communities. And I wanted to take a moment to pause and recognize that. And the lives that are lost. If you lived in West Adams, where I lived, The 10 freeway, if you've ever gotten on the 10 freeway, it's the most confusing freeway. It's like, why is it here? It goes, literally, it goes over a whole community in LA, and then there's these weird off ramps, like all of a sudden, and because the 10 freeway was made over the Black community. And that's why it's strange, whether you're from here or not. It's not like the 405 that seems like there's space all around, but the 10 actually goes over Black communities because they chose our communities, because who's going to push back?
Thank you for explaining that. Another thing I wanted to ask you about is, in your novel, you write it's past, present, current. Just kind of talk us through what the writing process was for being able to navigate so many different dimensions within this book.
Yeah, so I wanted to talk about how issues of today are are issues we've already fought, before, whether it's smallpox, the anti-vaxxers doing smallpox, then polio, and now COVID-19, whether it's masks and during smallpox, polio, or COVID-19. I wanted to talk about all the different civil unrest and uprisings. For instance, in the 1960s, that was the first LA riots, and then the 1990s LA riots, and then they tried to describe what's going on in 2020 as the riots over George Floyd. But it's the same thing, repeating itself and repeating itself. And like all cycles of abuse or wrong, like somebody has to choose to do something different. You have to step out of the cycle in order to change things. So that's what I really wanted to show, that and the fact that Los Angeles has always been brown. And what does that mean when our understanding of Los Angeles has been the golden age of Hollywood, has been all of that that has excluded us, even though we were always here.
Beautiful. Thank you for that. I think I have maybe one or two more questions left, and then I think it'll be time for me to share you with others. But there's so many really great, beautiful lines in The Perishing, but one that really stuck with me was this one more about it. But our lives are meant to mimic a passing breeze that won't return. Just if you can give us a little context there.
Girl, that was straight up a Bible verse that I was reading one morning. That's what somebody said that. I was like, whoa, I said somebody said that, wrote that um, as a Bible verse. And I thought, what if that's true, and that because this book is about struggling with what is everlasting life. What does that even mean? Like a pastor will tell you what that means. What does to live forever mean? We're trying to think of all these ways, to preserve our consciousness, even if our body goes, and, just replacing all the pieces. But what does it mean to live forever? Do we even come back, or is this just the end? We live this thing, whatever. I don't know, but I wanted them to wrestle with that, um, and that's what the book does. And hopefully successfully. So.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much. My last question, I think it's my last question. We'll see. If you learned that you were bound to reborn after death, how would you choose to live your life?
Oh, girl, if you would if you would have asked me this 2 days ago, oh my, you know what? I'm gonna be real. I thought about this a lot, like especially 2 days ago, because I was going through just a sadness. There's so much to grieve in the world. I think, and then the tornadoes. Just there's just so much to grieve. Those poor high school students who were killed. And then I said, what if I could do something different? My life is a life of service anyway. Walking away from a corporate law job to write because I felt like I was called here to serve, to represent our poorest. And I think, would I choose this again? When I could be so much more comfortable, when I could do, financially, I could do what the world wants me to do, to say, this is your past, to, live your life, and it's not just, and by live your life, I mean with money. But I also think, what if I was just a stay at home mom? What if my whole life was my kids and I did those things, like I went to all the soccer practices? Would my children be better? Have I been a bad mom? Like all the things I was regretting. Like, what if I took away from my children or my mother or my husband or my career? I could have a different life right now. Um, so all that to say, if I were to come back today, I would say I would do the same things, but a little differently. But if you would ask me 2 days ago, I would have been like, I would have chased the money, girl. I would have chased the money.
Well, when we experience freedom, then we get the other things we want, right? So we're glad that you're doing that. And again, thank you for writing such a beautiful book. You created such a beautiful world that allowed us to escape into and think about things and get to know characters that we even get to see ourselves in. And so just thank you for who you are and how you show up for us. And I can't wait to read future books from you. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Minda. And the same to you. I love Right Within. I love Memo. I know you have your new book coming out in April that I can't wait to read. And just thank you for being here and for taking your time to do this with me today. And I love you.
Diane, it's all yours.
Well, thank you so much. I'll ask my question first while people start putting their questions into the chat potentially or into our Q&A feature. But I guess as a person who is a professor, was working in law, and wrote a book set in the 1930s about Los Angeles, I was kind of wondering what your research process was like. Like I know, especially like you talked about the issues of freeways and kind of like urban planning as a tool for discrimination and racism. And I'm wondering, did you run across that when you were doing research in the archives at all? Like, or like, what was that like for you?
Oh, great question, Saya. So, in case there's still a sound issue, Cyan is asking, what is the research process? And when you look at urban planning, and you would see what they call redlining through communities, which basically meant that insurance companies and lenders would draw red lines on a map, like literally red lines, and say you can lend to this area, but not to this area. Um, and this is how much you can lend. So the parts that were redlined were Black communities, which meant that no matter how much you put into your home, you would still only get what you initially bought for it. So it never raised or anything like that. And in the 1930s, it's good to know that 70% of all homes, during when the stock market crashed, went into default and was foreclosed on. And it was in the high 80% that actually Black people own their homes. So there was no mortgages, there was no nothing. But they weren't able to get loans on their houses to be able to expand. It wouldn't change. So even if you tried to invest in the community, you couldn't get your investment back. So it stopped the communities from growing, the Black communities from growing, where all the other communities around were getting money and lending. So if you couldn't make the money, then you couldn't do whatever you wanted, whether it was a new bathroom or to start a business. So it's just, and that's how South Central LA became South Central LA. There was no money there, where it was for every other community. Um, so the research that I did, I read a lot of books, went to the library a lot. I have a limited bibliography on my website. If you go to natashadeon.com, just for this book, because I wanted people to kind of see, in the master's community for creative writing, some programs will say read 100 books, write one. So it was pretty much like that. And not only the books, but reading newspapers. I relied heavily on the LA Times. I read the 1930s LA Times. Um, I spent 2 weeks at Mesa Refuge up north, which is I got a fellowship to be a what they call moral courage fellow, and I just spent 3 weeks reading newspapers every from like 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. at night, reading newspapers, hearing how they talked, what they cared about, reading also diaries, things like that. So that's where I sort of got the sense of the people who weren't very different than who we are today. And who in the 1930s were saying things like, I'm not racist. What do you mean? Those ends have what they have. We have, so it's like, so in, it's like everything is the same. So for not everything, like we made progress, but the arguments are still the same. And you know that saying, as a, with the law background, you look at the arguments, the Supreme Court looks at the same arguments and they try to see what's different today than what it was, whether it's Roe v. Wade in the case today in Texas or whatever it is. So I know I was rambling.
No, that's exactly the type of response. I was like, I'm so interested in like what it was like delving into that while writing a book for people reading contemporary, right? We also, so we do have another question. We have that some might say that The Perishing is science fiction. Would you consider this novel science fiction? Like I know we've compared it to Octavia Butler. Like how do you feel about being science fiction?
That's a great question because, they say, I don't know, maybe it was Todd Goldberg. So one of my mentors, his name was Todd Goldberg. He wrote a book called Gangsterland, great writer. Um, and I remember he said when I was writing Grace, for instance, because I didn't know what that was, he said, write your story and then let marketing decide what kind of story you're writing. Because I didn't think for a minute, this is science fiction because there's no science in it, right? And they say this is fantasy. I was like, but when I think of fantasy, I think of, horses that fly and I love that too. And science fiction, I like futuresque, I love space, I love all that. So I thought it was speculative fiction, but I really didn't see a difference because it's how I see the world anyway. It's asking questions and being curious and then trying in this story to provide an answer for these characters.
Mhm. If it means anything, we do not have you in sci-fi in our store. We have you in fiction and in our new arrivals. Actually, you're up on one of our main shelves right now.
Ah, yay! Thank you,
Yes,
thank you. That's how I felt about it. I was just
exactly.
like,
It's
"Is
like
it science fiction?"
it's a
I was
bestseller.
like,
Is what it is.
"Yeah." My first panel, I was on a science fiction panel. I was like, "Oh no, oh no!" But I'm familiar with Octavia Butler. I'm familiar with N.K. Jemisin. I'm familiar with a lot of science fiction, especially dystopian, The Giver. That's all these different
Absolutely. You're right
books.
on
So
the
I was
money.
honored, and I just wanted to. So my question after then was, have I honored this tradition enough to have earned the title of science fiction?
Oh, absolutely. I feel like you really hit it on the nose too with speculative fiction, especially with the social aspects of what you're writing. Speculative fiction is perfect for what it is.
Yeah, thank you, thank
We
you.
do also, so last question, I think this is a really good last question. What is next after The Perishing?
Oh, that's that's a great question. Um, so I started another novel, and then it accidentally became two novels. But it, and that said, I don't, I don't know. So because one is sort of a response to, Grace, my first novel, was two storylines that are braided together. The Perishing has a similar technique in that it's different characters and they run together. And for me, it represents the way I tell stories, the way my mind works, weaving stories together because I think we're multiple people. So if I had a pronoun, maybe it would be they because I'm in different, whether I'm a lawyer, if I'm in front of a judge, I have a set of a toolbox that I use in court or with my clients. When I'm in front of a classroom, if it's a creative writing classroom, different set of tools. law class, different set of tools. Or if I'm going into a prison for Redeem, my nonprofit, it's a different set of tools. Or talking to a group. So I feel like there's so many versions of us that exist at one time, of all of us, and especially me because I actually I make a living strongly. They're equally divided throughout my life. Um, but there was something that I read that made me think that perhaps I should just be writing one storyline, that I should, you know, just follow the crumbs and the stories that other people have told and tell one story one way. So people, when I hear them describe grace, they're like, the perishing is way different than grace, or grace is way different. And for me, they're like, you know, they're the same. Or if I read a review and they say this writer does it this way, and I was like, well, I did it that way for that, but it's some. So I don't know. So I feel in a way that I'm supposed to be able to show that I can write a story a certain way. So that started the second novel, but I don't know if it's genuinely me or me just trying to say, fine, you want me to just be this person, then I'll be this person. And I don't want to be her either. So I don't know if it's a challenge or me, being somebody I'm not. So we'll see. I hope that's not too honest. Somebody asked. So there you go.
Yeah, I feel like that's a great response to like see your third book really represent what you want to see and not what people are asking of you. Is that what you're trying to? Is that what you're
Yeah.
saying? That's
Like,
such a genuine answer, and I appreciate that.
yeah, like who do I have to be for other people? I don't know. Because it occurs to me that it's not just for me anymore. It's for other people. There's an audience. And so do I dance the way I dance or do I do the Macarena? So, because that's the line dance we're doing right now. So I don't know. That's what I'm struggling with right now.
I love that. Thank you for such an honest answer. And that's a really nice, like genuine, beautiful note to end on, I think. Yeah, so wow, what a good answer. Thank you all for coming tonight. I know that it has been a gloomy day, and we really appreciate y'all having y'all here. And I'll send y'all to Minda and Natasha. I'll send y'all the link tomorrow. But thank you so much for your time tonight.
Thank you so much for having.
Thank you for Write With Them, these beautiful books that are so needed. It's been a great night.
Thank you so much. And hi, Dan. That's my editor. Hi. Thank you for being here, everybody. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Bye.
Have a good night, everybody.
Have a good night.
Bye.